Disclaimer. The viewpoints and opinions expressed by Evan Wiley in this podcast are solely those of the individual and do not reflect the official policy or position of Salesforce. Salesforce is not responsible for any content, accuracy, or opinions expressed during this podcast.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode of the Looks Like On podcast. Hey, guys, today we have Evan. I know him from Nova. Nova is a community college in Virginia. We met in a music production class, like how to set up a music studio. So that was before I was a politics major. So anyways, I haven't seen him since that specific semester at Nova. Must have been over 10 years now. And in this conversation, we talk a bit about careers, talk about AI, and also about the hologram. What is the hologram? What is this matrix? I don't know. Enjoy. Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to Looks Like On podcast. I haven't seen this dude in so long, like since Nova, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't
Music theory class, I think. Music recording.
music recording, and like, dude, I don't even know why I took that class. Like, like I wasn't even serious about producing anything. I just wanted to like be a pro musician, but I didn't even really define what that even was. So I was just doing anything with music.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the greatest way to start, because honestly, it's so easy to get caught up in like what you want to do with your career without actually just exploring it and seeing where your
True.
passion is. Because
Mm,
like we can always be like, oh, I want to be like an astronaut because of Neil Armstrong or something, right? But if we don't explore it ourselves, it's like, do we really have a passion for it? So
mm.
but no, I mean, like I think it's true with a lot of different things. Like you kind of just have to explore it and see if you like it. Um, so yeah.
Dude, like after I realized like I made a mistake, I just stopped Nova altogether for like I think one whole year. And sometime during that year, my dad was watching the Motorcycle Diaries on Netflix, and I just sat down and watched with him randomly, and it just blew my mind, and I changed my major to politics.
Oh, that's great. I think I've watched some of it, but it's been a minute.
Mm.
Like it was about like was a guy driving around like Europe, right?
It's like
Something like that.
do you know Che Guevara? He was like
Yes.
it's like his story when he was like younger before he even went to Cuba. It was like I guess him leaving his
Oh.
hometown on a motorcycle with one of his friends. So yeah, that just like blew my mind.
That's great. I mean, I actually remember some parts of that, because it sounds like that's his like younger years before he became like
Yeah,
Che Guevara.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then after that, I did the politics major. I actually enjoyed it, even though I hated government class in high school. That was like that class I hated the most. And then later I enjoyed politics as a major.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's half of it is up to the teacher you have. Uh,
Dude,
like
yeah.
if it a big thing, like kind of makes or breaks, at least my experience, because even for me and my government teacher, without saying who it was, I liked his approach, but it was like he would put up articles on the wall,
Mm.
and it was news articles. So you'd go around the room, read the news articles, and then I think it was either the next day, based upon the notes you took from the articles, you would have a quiz on it.
Uh,
Um, so I always thought that was interesting, because he was just really trying to instill like actually just reading multiple sources, reading the news.
mm.
Um, Now we hear all the term like fake news a lot, but I think a lot of that is just in terms of like, hey, like don't just rely on one source. You got to like check multiple sources.
Hmm.
And that's also kind of what like spurred me to like thinking about that holistically in terms of AI technology, because a lot of it is like now that everything is going to become more AI oriented. How can we like orient ourselves as people into like reviewing information that's important for us,
Mm.
without just relying on that one source? Because
True.
what I'm afraid of is it's like could be like you're just going to talk to like, for example, Google Gemini, but you're not going to like validate the sources, right? Like,
Mm.
well, not saying you in particular, like people in general, right? Like, because it'll be so easy to just be like, oh, well, I just want to quickly search for this thing, but I don't want to really check like where I'm getting the information from, right?
Hmm.
So that's where like it'll cite data sources, but I think it's really important for us to really introspect data and then say like, hey, is this relevant? Is it accurate? And that's where I've kind of like I've been slowly developing. Well, I'm actually pushing out now a version of like a reporting, basically web application where you could report these sort of issues you're experiencing. So you could report like hallucinations, copyright issues, or security issues. I call it like the three pillars of AI.
Mm.
So and you can have this other bucket. You'd be like, hey, it doesn't fit into any of these three, so I'm just going to put it to an other bucket. And essentially, have you heard of like Stack Overflow?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so it's like similar to Stack Overflow, but it's for prompts. So uh, Stack Overflow is essentially like any person who has like a coding issue will sometimes, if they get stuck on something, they'll go to Stack Overflow and be like, hey, I can't solve why this certain version of Java is not loading in my machine. And they're like, oh, well, you got to do this, this, and this command. And people upvote those correct answers, and then they put a check mark next to it to say like, this
Mm.
is an approved answer from Stack Overflow.
Hmm.
So I was thinking like, why don't we have a similar concept for that with AI? Because I see a world where AI is going to be like everyone's just going to be searching on AI tools, but who's to say if it's accurate or if it has copyrighted material
That's
that
true.
someone is going to cite and they don't know about it?
Mm.
And then like a security issue. So it's like, why don't we just have like a repository full of those reports? And then you could have the LLM companies come to that, put the check mark next to what they cite as the correct answer, right? Like the correct report.
Hmm.
And then either download that data, use it to build their data models better. And also it kind of gives that like community based approach to it. Because if you
Hmm.
think about it, like you don't know what the data model is feeding you or what sources it's feeding you from half the time, unless you ask it for the data source. So if you had like this community model, you could like really get that feedback in real time to be like, hey, you know, this is an issue, but the incentive I have for people to report these things is be like, hey, here's a certificate you can put on your LinkedIn or something. Be
Mm.
like, hey, I reported with AI or something like that, right? To kind of give like and like because I think it's a growing field, right? And but it's grown for a long time, but it's only really come into popularity and relevance since ChatGPT kind of like took over the market, right?
Mm.
So but I felt like this is a good like niche or opportunity for me to build something like that. Um and yeah, that's kind of like, sorry, I know we went off on a tangent there.
I know, it's totally
But that
cool.
was kind of like part of what I've been doing outside of work half the time is like doing
Nice.
this. And then my wife is expecting in August, so that's been a big
Yo,
life change.
your first
So
kid?
um yeah, yeah,
Nice, dude. Congrats. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it's amazing. It's I mean, I kind of like it kind of brought me back to the whole holographic life universe question, because like half the time
Mm.
I feel like, you know, if you uh you know, kind of like put intentions behind something in the right way, it'll like work itself out for you, rather than just like saying, oh well, you know, I want to find my life partner, right? That's very generic.
Yeah.
But if you kind of have like the good intentions behind it, because you say, I want to find a life partner because I have this and this intention for my life, it's like, and you frame it in like a third person perspective,
Mm.
your unconscious mind can kind of like work through those details for you. And I've been following like sort of like Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of Joe Dispenza?
Yeah, because you're talking about law of attraction and like manifestation.
Yeah, yeah. So he has these tracks sometimes. Like, so what I'll do is I'll try to think about the right things, the right intentions.
Mm.
You know, obviously, it's like we all have things or patterns in our life we want to change, but I feel like it's important to like to manifest those. You have to have your unconscious mind aligned with your conscious mind,
Mm.
because we have these tapes we play in our mind to be like, oh, I'm not good at this or I'm not good at that.
Mm.
And when we play those tapes, it like plays out in our real life. So if we want to change those tapes, we have to like change our mindset while we're sleeping too.
Yeah.
Because like that unconscious tape will be playing. So half the time, I'll write what I'm getting in the habit is writing down what my intentions are before I sleep. And then, because it's the last thing I think about, and then I'll go to bed and I'll play those tapes. It'll play those quote unquote like word tapes in
Mm.
my head. That way I can like change them when I wake up. But it's I mean, I feel like it's an ongoing process, right? It's like not just intention, it's like keeping the right habits and set. And it's like I feel like life is like this unconscious and conscious mindset, and you're if you're not in like sync with either of them, it's like it can feel like a battle sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you're like, because your conscious mind will and your ego will say you should do this, and then you're fighting so hard to go past that it really feels frustrating, like a struggle half the time. So that's why I've been kind of like focused on my mindset to be like, hey, I like if I want to like change in a positive mindset, then I have to like focus on like what can I unconsciously change about my mindset. Maybe it's like because what I've realized is the mind likes to focus on the past, so it likes to focus
Mm.
on like, oh, you did this wrong in your past. You're like you're such a terrible person, like so like
Mm.
it's like you're fighting what your past is, but then you're also redirecting your mind to tell you
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not that person. I'm this person now.
Uh,
And like I feel like that's been like probably one of the biggest struggles in my life, but it's been like, all right, how do I find the right approach that works for me?
mm.
Um, and how can you play those things out that it works for other people too? Because I think it's a common struggle. I feel like with a lot of people
Yeah.
is to be like, hey, how do I like get myself out of that mind trap? And then
Are you coaching
I
yet?
feel like people. Oh, I'm not coaching no, but I've got like I've had coaches before,
Mm.
but yeah, it's been like I feel like some coaches really are good because they have like a positive, you can feel that energy right when you first talk to them, and
Mm.
then after the call you're like, holy cow, like it just completely changed uh
Mm.
my whole vibration, right? My energy vibration after that call. Um, but I feel like it's not just a coach. It's like you have to change your own internal vibration, which I think is
Oh
the
yeah.
one of probably one of the toughest things to do. But it's
But
I
it's
feel like
doable.
it is doable. Yeah, yeah, it's doable. And and that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm trying to work on in my life is just changing my own internal vibration. Because I know inherently I'm a good person, but it's like sometimes like you can have like habits or things or patterns in your life that like trigger you, and then you're like, oh well, I don't want to, I'm not that person anymore, right? So it's like, how do I change those like unconscious habits or tapes, I
Ah.
would call them.
Okay,
So
I gotta share something with you that I haven't shared on this podcast ever, and I can't say in full detail what it's about. I can just say
mhm.
I had a really unhealthy habit that I wanted to drop for over 10 years, and I kept failing, and I did think for a long time that I just could not drop it. And something happened just like last week, that just some situation where I had to really stand up for myself. Um and after I did that, I accidentally like went headfirst into two of my biggest fears. One was disappointing a woman. Another one was being alone.
Mm,
And the situation where I stood up for myself, I had to tackle both of them at the same time. And so I just did that, like not thinking much about it, just standing up for myself. And then later that evening, I realized like I have less tension in my body than like ever before. That's so weird. And at the same time, my craving for my drug was also decreased. So
mm,
then I thought, why did that happen? Like, how is that even relevant? But then later, I ate an edible and I just sat down and just like asking, like, why did that happen like that? And then what I felt was like, oh shit, like the drug I was using was used as a way to cover up this uncomfortable feeling I had underneath.
yeah.
But now that I removed a lot of that feeling. There's still some left, I think, but I removed a lot of it, so the tension has decreased and my craving for the drug has decreased too.
Yeah, I feel like it's like this. That I feel like that's definitely true for me as well. Like, and especially with traumatic experiences too.
Mm,
Um, like I don't know, like a lot of ex-military people have PTSD
mm,
from trauma from like war, but it's also you don't even have to be like anyone can have PTSD. It's like if you've gone through a traumatic experience, that I feel like some of that energy stays with you whether we like it or not, and then we have to
mm,
like work through it constantly
mm,
to like unblock ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. So sometimes I've like morning workouts have been good for me to just like reset that energy, but also meditations.
dude,
Um,
yeah.
and then, but I have to get more in the act of like writing prayers because my part of my habits I'm changing are like, okay, like either like to jump into like side projects or work right away, and I don't take time for myself to like
Mm,
digest or process things that are going on in my mind. Um, which I find later on that like if I had done that, probably like just a brain dump, it would probably help my mentality throughout the day to
mm,
like go through the highs and lows because I feel like that unconscious brain is then like it'll spike during parts of the day,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, why am I feeling like this during parts of the day? But if I
Mm-hmm.
just take the time to like say like process everything I was feeling like the day or the week or the years before and like write it down and like reframe it, it'll like help me so much in the long term just like thinking about that. um because I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges I think that we face, especially now, like everything being digital. It's like it can feel so you can feel so detached from things
Mm,
uh, because you're not physically there, but at the same time, you are there and you're like processing your own feelings plus like the own experience you're having. But uh, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Like saying it like that. So it's basically
mm,
like take like basically the practices are like, all right, journal what you're thinking about, like what is process that you're still stuck on, and then reframing it in the third person. And then the other practice I was learning from someone was like, okay, well, so how do you reframe those and then keep mantras for yourself to be like, Evan is has a healthy budding relationship with his wife and really loves you know his newborn to be Matilda. So it's like one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm reframing things and restructuring things, and the way that I used to think about myself in my past, I'm removing that because I'm focusing on like what in the third person, what is Evan like in the future, right?
mm,
Um, so, because like I feel like part of that holographic universe, at least what I've been learning about it, is like we all have things that we can influence in our future, but we have all have a shared experience of our current state. Like
mm,
we're all shaping the current state and the future around us based upon what our thought patterns are and our actions.
mm,
So if we adopt the hive mentality of thinking like, oh, I'm like this because this other person says I am, then you're not shaping your reality anymore. You're letting that person influence your own future.
mm,
So if you take a step back and say, well, that's that one person's perspective, and you really hone in on like why they are thinking the way they are, you're able to then say, okay, well, I can process it like this and this, and then learn from that, right? Like to say like, hey, maybe it's part of my communication skills, like maybe I have to focus on this and this in order to
mm.
influence my own future to go this way. And I feel like
That's big.
that's a very important part of our own lives, is to say like, okay, well, I am not my past. I'm not even my current version of myself. I am who I believe I am in the future.
Mm,
So, and that's where I think like we're shaping that mentality of the holographic universe, is to say like, okay, everything in itself is almost a hologram of energy. How can we influence that hologram of energy with our own thoughts, actions, beliefs?
mm,
So that's why like I'll say it's by Michael Talbot, and it's called The Holographic Universe, but it's all about,
Mm.
how do we shape that?
I mean,
And I
can
think
you
that's even sometimes, yeah,
can you shape a future where you cure your PTSD?
yeah. I think it's interesting. Like, I think sometimes our future is determined by a lot of various factors too. So, um, there's been different like ways to process it, and I don't know if you've heard of people. Some people do what is it called? I ibuprofen or something like that. It's some sort of it's a form of ayahuasca.
Ah,
But they'll go do that, and what it does is it like unloads it's all the unconscious biases you have. But you have to be in that good mental state before you you
oh
take this,
yeah,
because
that's a hard trip.
you could, yeah, you'd have a bad experience. But I feel like there are healthier ways to process it. But like it's like you can, I feel like you can slowly work on it over time. But
Yeah.
uh most likely it's a increased experience where, like, hey, if I just like work out for the first time tomorrow, right, that I haven't for like a month or two, then you're going to be like, oh well, obviously I'm not going to like be in the same state I was like yesterday, but at least I have the mentality to say like, hey, today I'm in a better state than I was yesterday because I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It's the same way with our mind, but the mind can shape itself afterwards. I think a lot of people, like scientists, have said, well, your brain stops developing at like 25, but you
Mm.
can still, like, the brain's still malleable to a certain extent. So you could say like, hey,
Yeah,
if I constantly like keep shaping it and cultivating it, you can have less and less of those experiences over time.
dude,
At least that's my feeling. But
like my dad had a stroke, well, like 2 years ago, and he forgot how to write. Like he knew how to read, but he
mm,
forgot how to write, and he was like, he had a stutter, and he was mixing up like his languages and stuff. Like, and somehow this dude recovered, and right now his memory is better than before, and he still has like the same personality and everything. Like how like
wow,
so he really proved that the brain is plastic. It's like neuroplasticity is real. He somehow
yeah,
reconnected like all the wires again.
yeah. I feel like that's probably part of what Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink, because like it's all a matter of like nodes in the brain like firing at different times. Be like, all right, your nodes are firing on this and this, but maybe it's not firing here. So like that's what at least that's how I interpret what he's doing, is like
Mm.
reconnecting the nodes in your brain, so it's that way it's firing on these different cylinders maybe that we weren't processing before. But um
Dude, like that was challenging because I was here in Vietnam and that happened in Virginia. So like I wasn't even there when that happened and I couldn't like be there with like my family and stuff. When I got back to Virginia like 3 years later, my dad was already cured. So it was like nothing happened. It was so weird because the whole
wow,
incident happened while I was gone.
wow. Well, I'm so happy for you and your family, and I'm glad your dad's doing well. And like my dad even almost had a stroke. He drove himself to the hospital because
Wow.
he saw his heart rate was going up. Um, but right now he's having knee and ankle swelling, so he's worried about that. But it's mainly like he just has to like keep you know exercising, doing the right things, and eating the right way.
Mm.
But yeah, it's definitely like it's definitely good. Like the body is a miracle in like recovering itself,
Yeah.
and same with the brain. So
Yeah,
yeah.
man. I like one thing I did to try to help my dad. I don't know if it actually helped or not, but I made him some playlists of music that he liked from his high school time. And I wonder if that had any effect in like the reconnection of anything in his brain. I wonder. I don't know.
Uh, could be. Yeah. I mean, music is a big thing. Like, even my wife, when she'll go to like some musicals, um, she'll, like, the baby will be very active.
Mm.
in those parts. So like you even the actors on stage would see like her belly moving. So
Whoa.
it's yeah, it's like a big thing. And then obviously it's like music is such a, I think, ingrained into like everything biologically with us as human beings.
Mm.
um Even going back to like our ancestors, right? Like they had certain types of music that really spoke to them. um Obviously they didn't call it music back then, but maybe they called it something else. But it's obviously like a different, it's like you can't really, it's hard to communicate certain emotions through just speaking with someone or written. But music can really spark those like emotions within you.
Yeah.
And really, I also I think it could change aspects of your unconscious thought patterns as well, like to a certain degree, right? Like if you're going through a tough time, you'll throw on like maybe some Alicia Keys or something, and
Yep.
and change your perspective on things. And and I think it's really important to do that. Because obviously it's like things things will speak to people's unconscious biases more and more uh with different techniques, right? So
Hmm.
um
Yo, dude, so we
yeah.
have, well, time flew by. We have actually 10 minutes left. Because I'm gonna receive coaching after this call. But dude,
Oh, great.
but before you go, you gotta tell me though about the hologram. Like, what do you think it is?
Yeah. So I think it's the hologram is like it's kind of like if you think about it from a perspective of energy, like our thought patterns are energy, our activities energy. And then if you think about the universe as energy as a whole, like even if we don't think our thoughts shape like anything in the universe, I think to a certain degree they are.
Mm.
Because we could say like think about remote viewing, for example. Like remote viewing is like they'll get a prompt to be like focus on this thing, and then they'll go search for it in their mind and find the target and then write down things about the target, right? It's the same thing with our mind. Like we can have those intentions, and then we can shape that future based upon those intentions, whether it happens like in the next month, in the next 4 months, in the next year. As long as our
Mm.
intention keeps focused on that, those things will shape. So like
Mm.
I think energy in all its forms is filtered into the universe and then reverberates back to us.
Mm.
Because if everything's energy, your thoughts are energy, your body's energy.
Right.
And if you shape these in the right way,
And
then you
money
can
too.
change the holographic. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And then the frequency of it, right? So it's like
Yeah.
energy's frequency and amplitude. So if you change your frequency of those thought patterns and then the amplitude of them, then it'll change the rest of the universe to shape in that form.
Mm.
Maybe, for example, maybe someone has a bad thought about the presidential race, and then the other person has a really good thought about it. And then the other hive mindset of those other four people are like, no, this is a really good thing. It'll shape those events in the future to happen in a different way than if this one person has this one negative thought pattern about it, right?
Mm.
So that's why I call it the holograph. That's why I think a holographic universe is important to think about, because if we crowdsource those same like energy intentions behind what we're doing, it'll amplify the experience we have in the future.
Mm. Yeah,
And I
that's
think
true.
that's why, yeah, and I think that's why remote viewing is such a was caught on even since like the Cold War. Is because the government knew about this, tapped into it, and then like recruited people that were like really good at this to like remote view sites, either for other countries or other things that were like targets for them, gather this information. And that's what kind of took me down the path to be like, hey, if it's not just like, if there's things that we can do as people to shape that, that will make just like our shared experiences that much better for all of us. If we can just like not just focus on ourselves, but like focus on like creating this like shared experience in the future that's really like positive, cultivating.
Ah,
um
right.
and
Like
yeah.
then comes another topic, like how do you know what's good and bad?
Yeah. I mean, so good and bad is it's definitely relative, right? So it's like
Mm.
relative to your experience of what good and bad is.
Yeah.
Like I could say it's bad to assassinate or try to assassinate a president, right? But then maybe someone in some other country says, oh, well, I don't like America, so I don't think it's bad to do this, right? So because of their own experience, right? Maybe they're saying like, hey, I had such a terrible experience because of X, Y, and Z. So it's cultivated my mindset to not care about like that being bad maybe from the other person, but it might be good from my experience. But if you look at it from a perspective of cultivating a belief in a shared experience, regardless of your existing bias, like looking at it and detaching yourself from that and saying, okay, well, if I intentionalize that experience for someone else in the future, if I just removed myself from that situation, what would that experience look like? What would the outcome be? And then that having that shape the experience, like I think is like hugely beneficial. I mean, but that all comes back to like having the intentionality behind it, like removing yourself from the equation and just thinking about it holistically about outcomes, how things play out. And I think that's how you can shape good versus bad is like a good outcome might be like, hey, maybe we stop a nuclear war from happening. Maybe that could be a good outcome for everyone, right? I think we could all agree on that.
Sure.
Maybe a bad outcome would be like, hey, some other country like sends a nuclear warhead to us or to whatever country, right? Like that is started creating that bad outcome because we're like, okay, well, if someone fires one nuclear warhead, the other person has to fire that back, right? So that's kind of like a bad outcome shaping, right? So, but like focusing on those smaller pictures, and I think that's also where AI can come in and help with that, is to like remove the biases of like what's good and bad versus outcome from like the bias of the human perspective, and just look at it from like a data perspective and a mindset of like shaped reality that's good for like humanity as a species, rather than having a bias to be like, well, we only care about Hawaii, right? We don't care about anywhere else. What's the good or bad outcome for Hawaii, right? So does that make sense?
Like I hope, like if that ever happens, like whoever is shaping the future, I would hope that they read the Tao Te Ching before they do it. Have you heard of Tao Te
I'll have
Ching?
to read that too. I'll have to read that.
Check it out. Check it out. It's basically poetry, but there's a lot of wisdom there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. What do you think that there's a good or bad outcome? Like, do you believe in that, or
I mean, it just seems like many, like, or maybe all of the planet's issues that are caused by humans is caused from ego.
yeah,
So I think if you tackle that directly, then the whole thing gets affected in a positive way.
yeah, and that's what I kind of that's what I'm kind of understanding about. Well, how can AI help with that? Like, how can we remove bias with that? Because eventually, like, how I see it is like really you have a future where it's like AI is contextually understanding like our reality now, but then like it's all about like how do we cultivate models to be like agnostic of the ego aspect of it. Maybe AIs could have ego. Well, that would be an interesting question too about that.
Like
I
ego
mean,
is
it's
like
as long as you,
like ego is like whoever you think you are, right?
yeah, that would be interesting to see what does AI think about itself. Does it
Yeah,
have
right.
an ego? But I think like if you like, it's all right now, it's all based upon data models. So it's like
Yeah.
if you were to probably ask ChatGPT, does it have an ego? It'd be like, no, I'm based upon data or something.
Or like maybe one day be like, oh, like hey ChatGPT, do you have an ego? Like, yeah, I'm much better than Gemini or something. Like it could happen.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, it's just right now it's like, okay, well, when you're in the nascent stages of anything, your mind can just go wild with like thinking about like how will things shape up in the future. But that's also why I'm very passionate about like, okay, well, if you have guardrails around things, you could shape it better for everyone in the future, rather than just saying, all right, let it run wild, right? Like, obviously I don't think that's good for anyone, but
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Just
But it's good to chat with you, man. It's like I'm glad we were able to catch up, and like I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, dude.
And
We're gonna record again for sure because we have a lot more to talk about. And
yeah,
please read Tao Te Ching for real. I think you'll like it.
like DM me on Messenger like the name of it, because
Sure.
I'll probably try to butcher it trying to put it into Google search or something.
It's like it's different from Confucianism because Confucianism will tell you like this is how to be a good person. Here's a list of things to do. And then Taoism is like just wake up and you'll do all of them by default.
Oh, okay. And that's what Taoism is? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, all
And
right. All
there's
right.
like
Now you sent me down a rabbit hole.
dude, and that rabbit hole never ends. I looked for the ending, trust me. I was stuck for 2 years.
Oh, geez.
But
Wow.
enjoy,
Wow.
just enjoy that journey because it's so fucking cool.
Nice, man.